On the Age of Reinvention, I explore relocation and the expat lifestyle through the real life experiences of expats, people who move from Western countries abroad, and immigrants, people who live for years in the West. Who is Emily Bron, owner of the international lifestyle consulting from Canada? My life has been a series of relocations and adaptations. I was born and raised in the former Soviet Union, witnessed societal changes during the perestroika, relocated to Ukraine, and later, with my family, immigrated to Israel, where I had to navigate a new language, profession, and society. My second immigration in Canada, we face the challenges of integrating into a new country and adapting to a different climate and lifestyle. Currently, I'm preparing for my next life chapter and relocation to Mexico. I offer my knowledge about relocation and observations about current global relocation trends through the lens of immigrants who have lived for many years in the West. The life experiences shared by my guests are invaluable. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to share these insights with others who are considering a similar lifestyle change, particularly in the context of relocation and life abroad. Today, I have special pleasure. I'm meeting Rosemary Bointon, a certified content marketer and SEO strategist, writes about people having fun to keep themselves healthy. Formerly an international business lawyer, she has sought fun and adventure living and working in 13 different countries and visiting many more. She currently lives in Lisbon, Portugal. Welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you, Emily. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Even I know you have so many pages, chapters in your life, and your remarkable career trajectory has taken you from the being international business lawyer to becoming a certified content marketer. But please tell us a little bit about where you're from, family, and how you get to the international business lawyer work.
Okay, I was born in the south of England and by the sea, and I grew up there and married rather too young and had two children. And my first husband and I then went abroad and lived in Dubai for a while. But it was very difficult for me there because there wasn't very much I could do, and my children had started school, so I didn't really have enough to do. So I decided to apply to university, went to university as a mature student in my mid to late 20s, and eventually got a degree and thought, oh dear, I now need to earn a living. I had to decide what to do. And I'd always been interested in languages, although I didn't study languages. And I decided to go for law because this was something you get a professional qualification and so on. I did that and got duly qualified and chose to work for a very well-known firm in the City of London, which had foreign offices. And so that's how I started my career, by looking at all the firms which had foreign offices. And after a while, I eventually moved to live in Brussels. And then and I was asked if I would move to Hungary. I moved to Hungary just at the time when it was changing in the regime. So I went there in 1992. And then one thing led to another, and I ended up working in all sorts of different countries, a lot of them in Eastern Europe. And I ended my career by going on a pro bono trip for a year to live in Timor-Leste, which is at the other end of Indonesia and is one of the newest states in the world because it was only formed in 2002. And I worked in the legal department of the finance ministry and helped them to procure a new port, which is now in operation. So that was a really good experience. And in between, there were lots of other countries where I lived and worked. And I also went on holidays and so on. That's how I ended up traveling to so many different places.
Okay. So living and working in 13 different countries is no small feat.
Yes, I was very fortunate.
Can you share a notable experience or lesson from your international travel work journey? How you became digital nomad?
It was really because I was willing to do it. I volunteered to go, and then because people knew that I was open to it, I then got asked if I would then move. So I worked in Kiev for a year, and then a partner in the office in Georgia had a family crisis, and he was American and wanted to go back to the States, and they needed somebody to take his place in various deals that were happening. So I moved from Kiev to Tbilisi, and all of these things like that were serendipity. I mean, they weren't planned. It was difficult because they had a family crisis, but somebody needed to look after their clients, and not very many people would be willing to just get on a plane and move to Tbilisi. Perhaps they're at a different stage with their families, because my family were grown up by that point. So that was, I didn't need to worry about just leaving them, so I could go. But when if you've got a family to take with you, it can be a lot harder. I was fortunate in that respect that I was freer than other people. And then just one thing just led to another. I was asked to help out in Austria, and then I went to Russia.
Did you consult some government organization, or only private clients?
No, I did all kinds of different work. I helped the city of Moscow with the drafting of laws for having large projects which are financed privately or have some internal finance. I worked for the Czech government for a while, but I didn't actually live in the Czech Republic, so I don't count that one as being one of the places where I lived. But I went to and fro quite a bit with that one. One of the projects that I worked on was for Donetsk Steel, which, of course, a lot of people have heard of Donetsk these days because of the war between Russia and Ukraine. So I'm not really quite sure what's happened to those people that we were trying to help them out with rearranging loans, their business. And I don't know now what has happened to them all. It's difficult.
I understand. But I think it's your adventure spirit. And actually, you're adventurous seeker with all your moves, like professional and personal life. And tell me, please, like your family were always supporting you or moving with you?
My children certainly did, and my husband does too. A lot of the time when I was working in different places, he was actually living in Switzerland, and I would go backwards and forwards to see him, and he would come backwards and forwards to see me. So that it did involve being very patient with each other about the demands on our time and how we got to see each other. And if you didn't manage to make it for the weekend, we didn't manage to make it for the weekend. But then, never mind, you could take more time off, perhaps in lieu at some later point, and do something else. We tried to have adventures outside work, as it were, in addition to the adventure of going to new places all the time, because it was lovely that at the weekend you could walk around the city, or you could go out into the countryside and see all these different sites. I just feel that I was amazingly fortunate to be in that position.
After all these professional moves, I would say you landed in Lisbon for your living. Can I ask why Lisbon?
My intention was to, or our intention was to actually live in France because my son lives in France and with his family. So after I retired, we moved to live near my son. And we were going to build a house there, like a chalet, because it was up in the mountains in the Alps. But then along came Brexit. And for somebody British, which I am, and so is my husband, quite difficult to cope with because actually nobody knew how it was going to work. And we would only just started to buy some land. And we didn't even know whether we'd be allowed to live in the house afterwards. In fact, probably it would have worked out, but it made us feel very insecure at the time. We're also very keen on sailing, the two of us, and have a boat. And one of my aims after retiring had been to do a lot more sailing. We'd kept our boat in Croatia for many years because my husband had business there. And in fact, he's there today in Croatia. But we thought that we might move the boat somewhere different because we'd spent a lot of time sailing up and down the coast of Croatia because it's such a fantastic place to go sailing. And so when we lived in Timor-Leste, which is a former Portuguese colony, we met so many nice Portuguese people. And I've always liked the Atlantic coast for sailing because that's like there's a difference between sailing in the Mediterranean and sailing in the Atlantic. So I thought I'd never been to the Spanish or Portuguese coast sailing. So maybe we could take the boat round and take it over to Portugal because we had actually touched base in Portugal once when we took the boat into the Mediterranean, which was many years ago now. And so we thought we'd come and look at marinas. So we did. But we liked it so much here that we decided that we would live in Portugal and the boat would stay somewhere else. We're now in Portugal and the boat is in Italy. At some point, we might sail it back here, but it's getting quite a handful now because we're not getting any younger, the two of us. And so I think we might opt to get a smaller boat than the one we've got at the moment.
I believe you get residency, you legal resident of Portugal now.
Yes, we were resident before Brexit became law, as it were. We actually moved here in 2018 because it was partly because we thought that the Portuguese seemed to have a more relaxed attitude to Brexit and that they would honour arrangements with British people because of the really ancient treaties that Portugal had with the UK going back to the 13th, 14th centuries. That's why we thought that we might prefer to live here for a while. So here we are.
So how has living in Portugal been affecting you? What new did you learn about Portugal as a country, Portuguese people, which you knew a little bit, and a culture?
One was the history, because Portugal is quite a small country, and I don't think people realize how extensive their explorations were. We all know about Columbus, but what about Vasco da Gama and some of the other great navigators who went to Asia before other people did? The Portuguese were the first to explore Asia. And in a way, you can see that because geographically they don't have so far to go because they just go down the African coast and they can go around the corner and go into the Indian Ocean. And it's a logical progression because you do it bit by bit. And then, of course, they went to South America. And lots of people know about how rich the Spanish got because of exploiting the wealth of South America, but they don't know that it was actually opened up first of all by the Portuguese. That kind of history it opened my eyes to the achievements of the Portuguese nation, which I found really interesting. And of course, their great connection with the sea, you can't but help learning about all the fishing that they do. It was the Portuguese that colonized the Azores and the islands in the middle of the Atlantic. And many Portuguese people then went from the Azores, went to live in North America. and parts of Canada and so on. And again, you don't really hear much about what they did, but they did that. And then we heard about how there's some Portuguese who are known in America for raising cattle over towards in California, and I think, and they all come back to the Azores to celebrate each year, apparently. And there's all these kind of cultural activities that you just don't hear about in a way that you do. Like everybody knows about the Spanish and bullfighting. It's common knowledge that very much knows about how the Portuguese celebrate their relationship with cattle, wonderful climate and conditions of raising animals which exist in the Azores. And then that there's the whole fishing industry, whaling, and in particular, cod fishing. I guess one of the things about modern Lisbon is something that I really noticed when I first came here. The supermarkets, when you walk in a Portuguese supermarket has a very particular smell. And the smell is of salted codfish. It's called bacalhau. And it's an interesting dish. You can do all sorts of different dishes with the bacalhau, the salted codfish. And it's eaten at Christmas and on anniversaries and birthdays. And every supermarket has a section devoted to bacalhau. And it is rather pungent in its smell. So it perfumes the, the whole of the supermarket. So that's something that I've really learnt about. And there's a delightful little museum devoted to bacalhau, one in the main square in Lisbon itself.
I've been recently again in December in Lisbon, and obviously bacalhau and all around it. It's a big sign of pride and trade.
Yes. Yes, exactly. It was traded everywhere. A lot of their fish now comes from Norway because they're overfishing and all the rest of it, not just by the Portuguese, but through many countries have put big fish factory type ships into the Atlantic, and they're taken out too many fish. They don't have the same numbers as they used to. Anyway, it's one of the delights of going shopping.
Thank you for sharing it. And as far as I understand, despite all adventures and movement in your life, it was not enough for you. That's why you started to set up 30 days challenges for yourself. You probably started do it earlier than it became part of the online culture, I would say. Please tell about aspects of this 30 days challenge, and what is a memorable challenge you set up for yourself in Lisbon? And I understand that you involve other people as
I started it for myself, really, to help me to. I'm a great believer in having fun. And because I think if you have lots of fun, then you're going to remain much healthier. And I unfortunately have had too many bouts of ill health, so I'm very keen to work out how to make the most of life. You could have fun and enjoy it, and continue to have fun to a nice old age. I'm doing moderately well so far, so got to keep going. And that's where the idea for 30-day challenges came from for me, because it was out of my own need. And one of the first ones I did was a lot of fun, and I continued doing it from time to time. I don't do it all the time. And that's why I set myself a 30-day cold water challenge. And actually, I started that one in France. I'd read about Wim Hof, called the Iceman. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's Dutch. He lived in Spain for a long time. And he has the Guinness World Record for sitting on an iceberg with no clothes, or with very limited amount of clothing. And he takes people on adventures up Kilimanjaro, just wearing shorts and with no t-shirts and things like that. It's quite an extreme thing. So I thought that I would try this in a much more limited way. And of course, where we lived in the mountains, there was a lot of glacial water that came down in the rivers. And so I took up just walking up to my knees in the cold water. And I found that a lot of fun. And to begin with, it hurts quite a lot. It really takes your breath away and all the rest of it. He swims underwater, under ice and things like that. And I don't do that. I'm nowhere near as extreme. But on the other hand, I still find the challenge of having cold showers fun. And it does stimulate you and get your blood moving around you and makes you laugh and smile. It takes a while to get to that point, but it works. It really does. So, as I said, I did it in the little local rivers that were local to where we lived in France. And it's more difficult to do it in Portugal because although the Atlantic is pretty cold, it's not that cold. And also, neither is the water supply. Because when you live in the mountains in the Alps, the water supply is really cold because it's been snowed on and all the rest of it. Whereas in Portugal, it doesn't really freeze, at least not when you live at sea level, which is what we do now, rather than up high in the mountains. So that's been one that was great fun. And then another one that I've done, which I always enjoy doing and has been very useful here in Portugal. Again, I started doing it before because I started it to improve my French and when I lived in France, and that is talk to a stranger. Do that. So every day for 30 days, you have to talk to a stranger. So that means that when you go out on a walk, you have to find somebody to talk to. And I did make a couple of quite nice friends doing this when I lived in France. One lady had 2 chickens in her garden, and I used to stop when I was on the walk and look at the chickens. And then eventually she started talking to me about the chickens. And then one of the chickens died, and then we mourned the loss of this chicken together in French. And then her daughter gave her another one, and so we celebrated the arrival of the new chicken. And I would never have talked about chickens to anybody other than because of this challenge to go out and just say something to somebody in passing, as it were. And it was because I walked past her garden nearly every day and she had the chickens in her garden, so I saw them and used to stop and say hello to them.
So when I'm listening to you, going through your stories, what it's really good definition for you in 3 words. I believe it's a language, lover, and life. 3 L's actually determine yourself.
Yeah.
They say to know a language is to have one more window from which to view the world. And with your love for linguistic, first of all, how many languages and speaking and how it enrich your life stories and your interaction with people and actually probably lead you to writing to be SEO strategist and writer.
Yes, I only write in English because I'm not brave enough to write in a foreign language. The British are very, very diffident about expressing themselves in another language. They don't like to open their mouths and just talk. And that's why the talk to a stranger challenge is quite hard for somebody British, because some people just do it naturally, of course, but I certainly wasn't one of them. I was strung up by the British attitude of, oh dear, I can't say this, I'm going to embarrass myself, and oh, I'll get it wrong, and things like that. But anyway.
So how many languages you can converse?
I have learnt quite a lot, but I can't say that I can particularly speak them. Some of them I learnt such a long time ago. I've never learnt to be completely bilingual or anything. My grandchildren who live in France, they went to French schools and they spoke English at home, and they're completely bilingual. But it's very hard if you don't learn as a child to become. We
are trying our best. I'm trying. I'm
Yes.
still learning.
Yes, I know. I try my best too. But the other thing is that when you're married to somebody who's English as well, I think if you've got the 2 languages going on in the same household, it does help a lot because you hear it more frequently. And that was another thing about the challenge for talking to a stranger, because I would say hello to all the people down the street where we live here. And now they all talk to me. I can't walk down the street now without having conversations, probably 3 or 4 before I even get to the end of the road, because I always bump into somebody I know. And that's come from taking the initiative and actually speaking up to begin with. and trying to say things and, of course, getting them wrong. But I can read Portuguese pretty well, but I can't really speak it that well. I can speak it well enough. I was talking to the plumber this morning about a leaking valve on the roof of our house, and I was asking him what the word for gutter was because I couldn't remember that. So I can do things like that, but then actually he told me what the word for gutter was, and I've already forgotten it. So I need to pay more attention.
I remember you mentioned once in our conversation that for the purpose of learning more Portuguese, you living in actually Portuguese area. And today in Portugal, you can meet expats from many different countries. So at the same time, to exercise your other language skills.
Yes, that is true. Because when we moved here, which was 5 years ago now, we were the first foreigners in this street. But now there are quite a few. There's a French lady across the road, and then next to them there's a Jamaican couple, and there's a Russian lady and her husband live a couple of 100 yards away in the other direction. And we have an Australian friend here and some Swedish friends. And because my husband doesn't like learning foreign languages in the way that I do, it does tend to mean that our social life is much more mixed with English speakers. But it's not difficult to make a social circle. But what I must say that I do enjoy speaking to local people, and I get on well with the neighbours, which is really nice.
And as far as I know, one of the latest interests you have is writing about aging.
Yes.
And actually covering topics such as changing careers, finance, maintaining active and healthy lifestyle. What you would say about it?
Yes. What I would say about it is that what I'm interested in most is how are you going to live when you get older? How are you going to make the most of your life? What are you going to do with yourself? For some people, quite a big crisis in their life. And I got the idea for this because when I first started thinking about writing, it's some years ago now, I was thinking about writing about being a grandparent because at that time I was a relatively new grandparent. But I realized that actually part of being a grandparent is what you want to do is you want to be able to keep up with your grandchildren. You want to be able to run around with them and you want to do stuff with them. And in my case, I wanted to take them sailing and teach them sailing, and I wanted to travel with them and things like that. And obviously, those are aims that a lot of older people want to carry out, because those are the things that make your life really fun. Celebrating with your family and having good times and doing stuff together. I remember taking them round Split in Croatia because we have a boat in Croatia, and it was really fun to stay in the marina there for a week or so and actually look around at the palace there and the other Roman remains and so on. It was great fun to do that with the children and eating different food and all the interesting things that you do when you travel. We have some wonderful memories of things like that we've done. As you age even further, you've got to take into account that your powers, even if you've been quite sporty and fit as I have been for most of my life, they decline. And you've got to work on it a bit harder than you used to. But then the thing is to make that itself some fun. So I actually started looking at how to have fun with your grandchildren to looking at how to make it fun to be in a position to have fun with your grandchildren.
Absolutely. How to be active.
Yes, exactly.
Enjoyable.
Exactly. Fun in that way. That's how it developed. And the trouble is that there's so much to write about in that area. My husband, for example, he still wants to work on the business that he's trying to create in Croatia. He never wants to retire. Whereas I wanted to have a change of life and did retire and to be able to try to do different things. And
saying retire from the past. For me, retirement change the meaning, the word itself. You retire from your past and you start your new life chapter or adventure or new business or something new, project, sport, dance.
Absolutely. And when I was thinking about the things to do with being a grandmother and looking at my getting on for teenage grandchildren at that point, I was thinking your children who are going through their teenage years, they are undergoing huge changes. They've got physical changes, they've got mental changes, they're growing up, they're getting into new relationships, they're moving away from their parents, they developing interests in careers and all this sort of thing. But actually, I saw people around me of my own age, in like late 50s, early 60s, 70s, and older. And they are doing exactly the same things, but it hasn't been recognized as people think that, okay, you stop working and that's the end of it. And then you might go on a cruise and you might look after the grandchildren for your kids, or you might move to live nearer them, and it's a much more passive way of looking at life. I know that's what my parents lived
We
in that
live in a
way.
different time.
But some people find it quite difficult to make the adjustment, just as some teenagers find it difficult to make the adjustments to the new kinds of life that they're expected to lead when they are more independent and so on. And a lot of people get their identity from their jobs. And you might be left with the feeling that you have no purpose in life, that what you do, it's like life becomes can become quite boring if you let it be. So you have to go out and look for it and make the changes yourself. It has to come from you, from within you. But people find that hard to do, and so that was what gave me the spur, this sort of comparison between teenagers going through certain stages of life and older people similarly going through changes of life. And after all, it was what I did, what I was doing. And I've always wanted to write. When I was like 6 and 7, I used to write plays for me and my sister to perform for my parents. And I've always written in one form or another. It might have been extended letters to people, and as a lawyer, you write contracts. Okay, it's not such an interesting form of writing for most people, but it is still a form of writing. And you've got to be very conscious of the words you're using and so on, and the concepts, and making it clear and comprehensible for other people. And it just seemed like a natural development to try and do that.
It's one of the purpose of my podcast, actually, to show and prove people that it's possible. There are many people who already did it and doing now. And I believe in Lisbon, specifically and around, there should be some clubs for adults, I would say clubs by interest, sport, music, like a community club. So people can take different classes, even language and other subjects.
Yes, the digital nomad community, admittedly, a lot of them are young, but they are the ones that come here and just work on a short term basis and then leave. Although they've introduced a visa which lasts for a year now, which is meant for what I would call real digital nomads. I've always regarded myself as a serial nomad, where I go and plonk myself down somewhere for a year or two or more, and then move on to somewhere else afterwards to get a different experience. Because when you actually live somewhere, it's different than from just being there and staying there for a couple of months, even. If you're living there a bit more longer term, you get a more inside experience of the daily life of a country. But there is so much for digital nomads here. Huge meetup groups and Facebook groups. And in the little place where I live, which is a little relatively, it's mostly Portuguese here, enclave. We're just on the other side of the river from Lisbon. So to get to the centre of Lisbon, I get on the ferry, which is terrific fun. I really like doing that. And that's a lovely aspect of life in living here in Portugal. And to be able to meet with people in this little area, we have a friend of mine and I set up a little walking group. It's only quite small at the moment, but it's people come and go. And that's a lot of fun.
So, what, in your opinion, helping people to live active, enjoyable, and productive life for many years? What is the secret here?
Being a little bit brave, I think, is very important. That's because when you haven't done something before, you have to take a deep breath and say, okay, I'm going to go. And that can be hard to do. It's really hard to, obviously, look, more people do it now than used to in the past, but it's still not that easy. And lots of people are quite nervous about taking off and just getting into another country. I got so used to moving around that somebody said to me, "What about working somewhere else?" And I said, "Okay, sure. Oh, I can be there on Tuesday if you like." They said, "What?" We were thinking about maybe in 3 months or something, that you need more time to organize yourself. But I got used to moving, so I wasn't bothered. I could just pick myself up and go.
For those who stand at the crossroads, eager yet uncertain about embracing the expat life or making a daring career switch after 50, what words of encouragement or advice would you share?
I would say just go for it because uh, you will have a lot of fun, stressed out with it as well. But that's part of the experience. And it's quite stressful being at home and doing nothing and being bored out of your mind as well. Why not try something? A little bit of stress is a really good thing. One of the articles I wrote was about hormesis, which is the thing that you need a certain amount of stress because actually it stimulates you to learn more things and do different things, and it energizes you if you do that. Hormesis can be a very good thing. If the Navy SEALs one is the most well known saying about it, which is if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I'm not advocating that you do anything so extreme because you don't have to be extreme. You can take small steps. That's, I think, the second thing that I would say is first is go for it. But the second thing is do it in small steps to begin with. Don't just, some people, I don't know how they do it, but they just sell up and they just go, right? And if you've never done it before, I think that's really hard and really stressful. But actually, what you can do is you can, for example, if you have your own house or something in one country, you can rent it out for 6 months or something, and then you can rent a house somewhere else to live for 6 months. And maybe that's the way you can do it. And some people, of course, have a lot of financial problems to do that kind of thing. And if you don't have an income and you think you're going to try and get a job somewhere else, that can be make it really quite hard to do. The thing is to do small things first and don't tell yourself you're going to live in Antarctica for 6 months when you don't like it when it rains or something because it's not realistic.
Be realistic, but try new things.
Yes, but try small things to begin with, like you go and learn a new dance or go and learn to swim if you can't swim, or all sorts of different things that you can do to take small steps to open your horizons to new experiences. And you will find that the larger experiences will come along because you will suddenly start, as you start looking for them, they will appear and you get the chance. Because I think every move I made was not one actually asked for it. It was that people came to me because they knew I was open to it. So my firm, when because I'd actually got quite bored doing what I was doing in one place, and I just went to and I resigned as a partner and in a law firm, and then I went to the senior partner and said, I don't feel that I'm contributing the most to the firm, and what can I do for the so that I had a long notice period of a year. So I said, what can I do that would help the firm? And actually, what I did was they said, we need somebody to go to Eastern Europe. So would you do that? Yeah, of course. I've done it before. Yes, I'm off. So I did. And then they then asked me, would you go here? And then the next person asked me. So I didn't actually all these opportunities just presented themselves to me rather than me going out and looking for them. But you have to make yourself open to them in the first place, because if you don't do that, then they won't ever arrive.
Absolutely. And I know that you are working on your book. What is the title of the book and what is about?
The book is called Go Walking because I've had various bouts of illness, and getting over it has been quite difficult in various ways. And so I was trying to encourage myself. It was like setting myself a 30-day challenge, as it were. How could I get myself to do more of the things which would be good for me to help me get better quicker? And I knew that I needed to do more exercise because a couple of the things that had gone wrong with me involved getting very dizzy and not being able to walk very far. And I knew that I wanted to concentrate on going out and walking. Going out and walking needed to be made into some fun for me. I started thinking of all the things which could make walking fun. And I've come up with more than 80 ideas about what you can do when you go for a short walk that will make it more fun. So that's what the book is about. It's about different ideas to turn reluctant walkers into motivated walkers who have turn it into a habit that which they then don't have to think about because they just do it. And I'm certainly not all the way there back to where I used to be, because the first time that I was ill, I got better through starting off by going walking, and then I took up running and trained for half marathons and things like that. I'm not doing that this time. I'm just doing it quite gently. And what I have done is I've learnt all sorts of different the names of flowers in Portugal, because there are just so many. And one of the joys of walking here is that the profusion of flowers that you get all year round, not in the summer because they all die off because it gets like all brown here then. And the names of the different kinds of birds and so on, things like that, which I didn't pay attention to before. But once you start to pay attention, you see how interesting it is and what fun it is, so that I can actually name it. I can walk along and say, oh yes, look, there's an onion weed or something that I'd never heard of a year ago. That's just a small example, but I've got all kinds of silly ideas as well to make it fun, and practical ones as well to help you get stronger but making it fun while you do it. That's the general idea. So for me, it's always about the connection between fun and living a longer, healthier life, and so that you can actually do more and have a happier life because you have the ability to enjoy it more and your physical being.
Thank you very much for your time, for your stories, for your wisdom. And today I was speaking with Rosemary Bointon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really nice to talk to you too.